Hi everyone, welcome to another Unreal Engine 4 tutorial. I've had a request for a quick video asking how to set up destructible meshes. So today we are going to touch on the very basics just to get you up and running. First thing you want to do is go into your settings, open up your plugins window, and in the search bar type in Apex. You need to ensure that this Apex Destruction plugin provided by Epic Games is set to enabled. If not, just click in the toggle box and restart your engine when prompted. Once the engine reloads, you close that down. You need to decide what mesh you want to make destructible. I've just got these cubes here which come with the starter content when you create a new project. So right click on a mesh and select Create Destructible Mesh. This opens up the Destructible Mesh window. If you haven't made your mesh outside of the engine, you can let the engine handle the fracturing of the mesh itself. If you're an artist, obviously with 3ds Max skills or any other Blender skills, Maya skills, anything like that, you can obviously make the chunks outside of the engine and you can import them in here. Over on the right you have your settings. They're all very well tooltipped, so I encourage you to play with all these, but today we're just going to leave them as default, except we're going to click this Enable Impact Damage. This top section basically sets how much damage your mesh can take before it breaks, etc. Debris, this is how long the pieces of debris will last for before they spawn out. And down here you've got the setting for how many pieces your mesh will fracture into. Obviously the more pieces you set it to, the more performance it's going to eat up. So for today we're just going to leave that on default. Once you're happy with your settings, I encourage you to play with them. Click on Fracture Mesh and you get a preview of how your mesh is going to look when it breaks. Click Save when you're happy. Come out of here and you'll see in the folder where your original mesh was, it will have duplicated your mesh and added DM to the end, which obviously stands for Destructible Mesh. We drag this into the world. There's just a couple more settings we need to go over before we are ready to test it. Over in your details panel, if you scroll down, here you can set particles and sounds for when your mesh breaks, but what we're looking for is the physics section. Ensure Simulate Physics is set to true, and then if you go to the advanced settings, if you can't see them, click this little arrow at the bottom of the physics section and that will open up the advanced settings. You have this start awake setting. This basically tells the engine whether this object is starting the game with physics enabled or whether it's going to enable the physics once it takes any damage. So if we start awake, when we start the game, gravity is going to take over because this mesh at the minute is just in the air and the mesh will fall to the floor. When that happens, it will take damage and that causes the mesh to break. If we set start awake to false, then start the game, gravity is the mesh has simulate physics enabled, but it's not starting awake. So if we spawn a gun, cause some damage to the mesh, then it starts to simulate physics. The one thing about the setting the impact damage to true is, depending on your settings, any sort of collision with that mesh will cause it to take damage. So me simply walking into the mesh is enough with the settings set to default to cause the mesh to take damage. Now if we go back into the mesh, enable impact damage, set that to false, back into our world. Now the mesh is simulating physics, but because that is set to false, I am no longer able to cause it damage just by walking into it. However, if I spawn a gun and shoot it, it then breaks. So that is the very basics on how to enable destructible meshes in the engine and how to quickly set one up. I encourage you to go and play with these settings. If you need to find any more information, you go to the Epic Games Unreal Engine 4 website and look at the documentation. There's quite a bit on what all these settings can do. So hope you found that useful, and I'll see you in the next video.